Namaste. So I just thought I'd have a little look at chapter 9 before I meet with Steve to discuss whatever comes up. So I decided I might as well record it so then we can look at it together at the same time. So I'm just going to start on verse 1 and then I might skip some verses. Let's see. It's called Definition of the Videhamukta. Videhamukta. One liberated out of the body. Here, Nadaga, the rare exposition of the characteristics of a Videhamukta, one who is liberated out of the body. He is a Videhamukta who has disembodied liberation, who, devoid of all recollections, abiding in that itself, peaceful, exalted, a mass of sublime bliss, not attached to any forms and in great silence, is of the nature of Brahman alone, of the nature of awareness. He is a Videhamukta, who is the undivided self of all, of the nature of undivided supreme peace, unattached, of the nature that has nothing, not even liberation, of the nature that has no form, who is of the nature of truth, awareness, bliss, and who is only of the nature of perfectly full Brahman. He is a Videhamukta who remains as the self, which is defined in the great aphorisms, who is the supreme self, a mass of bliss, who is the pure self without any actions, who is the natural self, which is just consciousness, who is the self alone, which has nothing apart from it, the undivided self, which does not have the 6 transformations, and who is the delusionless, perfectly full Brahman. He is a Videhamukta who, without any conclusions or contemplation, that Brahman is I, and I am Brahman, remains as pure consciousness. He is a Videhamukta who remains changeless, without any modifications of the mind, such as either the Supreme is I or it is not so, either all that exists or it is not so. Basically, it just means you're not thinking, you're not referring to a thought, or you're not referring to any ideas. Literally, you're just being yourself. What I'm gonna need to reference. He is a Videhamukta who is changeless, who has no misconceived thoughts of anything, anywhere and any time, who eschews any knowledge of that, and who himself exists as Brahman. He is a Videhamukta who is motionless, who has no thoughts that he is motionless as stone, who has no superimposition of any kind, and who is ever a mass of existence, knowledge, bliss, Brahman itself. Variations of time, such as past and others, illusory variations of place, variations of objects, having none of these is the Videhamukta, devoid of any trace of such differentiations as this, that, you, this man, that man, I, she, he, and other such notions, and established in the Supreme Brahman, the mass of knowledge, is the Videhamukta, pure, attributeless, the eternal self, of the nature of eternal knowledge, subtle, the self of time, yet timeless, the self of gods, yet without gods, the self of all without all, the truth, the mass of bliss, the peaceful, the shining, established in the nature of the shining Supreme Brahman, is the Videhamukta. The pure self, without the distinctions of the knower and knowledge, the Supreme Self alone without any worlds, the self of knowledge with no insentience, the one self without any non-self, the fearless self without any fear-inducing misapprehensions, the self of bliss and of undifferentiated consciousness, the self of beginningless, undivided Supreme Brahman, Established as thus is the Videhamukta, the self of liberation without any bondage, the self alone of existence without duality, the self of pure knowledge without any differences, the self of undifferentiated aloneness, the self without the faulty ego, the shining self without anything to see, the undivided self of Supreme Brahman. Such is the Videhamukta. The beings, Ishvara, the world, the renowned Vedas, the scriptures, the holy epics, the sacred Puranas, Agamas, other works, and all manifest things are indeed Brahman, and I am this true Brahman, and not different from these. One who is established as the Supreme without any of these ideas is a Videhamukta. There never exists in the least any of the appearances such as the world, individuals, and the Supreme. All is of the nature of knowledge Brahman, and I am that Supreme Brahman, without any of such bhavas in the least, and remaining as just perfectly full consciousness, a mass of bliss, pure, peaceful, and silent, is the Videhamukta. Immeasurable in the least, unlimited, of the nature of knowledge, the atom of the atom, blemishless, with nothing apart from him, and transcending the fourth state. Remaining thus is the Videhamukta, without the illusion of name and form, the blemishless mass of supreme bliss, the pure self, the supreme Brahman, and abiding alone as that itself. Such is the Videhamukta. Transcending the entire mobile and immobile world, of the nature of truth alone, with no good or evil, no faulty bondage or liberation, the one perfectly full, undivided self, the peerless supreme of the supreme, the self of all, devoid of all. Having become the Supreme Brahman, the pauseless, exalted, pervasive expanse of consciousness, he who remains thus, without reversion, is the Videhamukta. Without truth or non-truth, without sentience or insentience, likewise without knowledge or ignorance, without meditation or non-meditation, without states of thoughts or thoughtlessness, likewise without aims or absence of aims, and with himself established as the eternal Supreme Brahman, is the Videhamukta. Stilled in silence, of the nature of truth, knowledge, bliss, of the nature of eternal peace, of the nature of infinite pervasiveness, of the nature of the immense expanse of consciousness, of the nature of eternal consciousness alone, becoming himself the all-full, blemishless, supreme Brahman, is the Videhamukta. Ever of the nature of the Supreme Brahman, ever the undivided, ever of the nature of truth, ever changeless, ever of the nature of full consciousness, ever full of consciousness bliss, and ever the one undivided essence without duality, is the Videhamukta. Of the nature of a mass of truth, knowledge, bliss, entirely, perfectly full, movementless, a rock-like mass of exalted knowledge, of the nature of untainted purity, ever transcending everything, devoid of any thought of that, and abiding as the Supreme Brahman itself, beyond the reach of words and mind, is the Videhamukta. Just like one who doesn't touch anything. Things come, thoughts, ideas. They might appear or they might not. It basically doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to Videhamukta. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. It literally doesn't matter. They don't think. They don't measure. Literally, it's just It's another word for the self. Videhamukta is another word for the self, one who isn't touched by ideas, not shaken by ideas. That's it. Of the nature of a mass of truth, knowledge, bliss, entirely, perfectly full, movementless, a rock-like mass of exalted knowledge, of the nature of untainted purity, ever transcending everything, devoid of any thought of that, and abiding as the supreme Brahman itself, beyond the reach of words and mind, is the Videhamukta. Without any illusory conditionings, such as the body, with no objects to see, with no actions arising out of delusion, remaining as complete silence, is the Videhamukta, without any thoughts of differences, without a trace of anamnesis, himself being the one supreme Brahman without duality, is the Videhamukta. Nadaga, without the thoughts of various worlds, without any thoughts of the peerless supreme Brahman, remaining as the all-blissful supreme itself, and of the nature of boundless being, is the Videhamukta. Existing as the complete, perfectly full bliss, the incomparable, wonderful bliss, the supreme Brahman of the nature of consciousness bliss, full of consciousness, is the Videhamukta. Without a variety of thoughts, without any variation of qualities, becoming the self-illumined supreme itself, free from ignorance, is the Videhamukta. Without any wandering activities of the mind in the least, and likewise without any need for any deed, himself having become the changeless supreme Brahman, is the Videhamukta. Remaining indivisible, without a trace of the triad of bodies, without any remembrances of the body, without any modifications such as birth and others, being the atomic as well as the infinite, without a trace of the appearances of duality that develops sorrow, becoming himself divisionless, and remaining the indivisible supreme Brahman, is the Videhamukta. Remaining changeless as the supreme Shiva, higher than the highest, the supreme self, the supreme bliss, the supremely pure nature, the truth that cannot be perceived by anyone, the infinite without interior or exterior, the essence of the crest of the Vedas, the pure consciousness, the indescribable, having himself become the blemishless supreme Brahman, is the Videhamukta. Indeed, the Videhamukta remains established as the one self, which cannot be described as this or that, the eternal absolute reality, the great consciousness beyond the reach of the mind, the bliss beyond the range of speech and mind, untainted by unsteady duality, the nature of unvarying non-duality, and the supreme that is one aspect always. The Videhamukta, who has become the indivisible supreme, is one who remains in the essence of the nectarian Brahman, who partakes of the essence of the nectarian Brahman, who revels in the essence of the nectarian Brahman, who enjoys the essence of the nectarian Brahman, who is immersed in the essence of the nectarian Brahman, who abides in the essence of the nectarian Brahman, and who is himself the essence of the nectarian Brahman. The Videhamukta, who has become the indivisible supreme, is one who remains in the great bliss of Brahman, who experiences the great bliss of Brahman, who is happy in the great bliss of Brahman, who rejoices in the great bliss of Brahman, who is absorbed in the great bliss of Brahman, who is attuned to the great bliss of Brahman, and who is himself the great bliss of Brahman. The Videhamukta is the indivisible supreme self, who is of the nature of the great bliss of Brahman, who is in the family of the great bliss of Brahman, who has the Shiva worship that is the great bliss of Brahman, who has succeeded in attaining the great bliss of Brahman, who enjoys the nectar of the great bliss of Brahman, who is intoxicated with the great bliss of Brahman, and who is himself the great bliss of Brahman. The Videhamukta is one who has no interactions with the cycle of births and deaths that projects the picture of the world, the individuals, and the Supreme, who is the complete, perfectly full of, who is the boundless being, who is of the nature of knowledge, who is the mass of bliss, who is the one, who is himself the Supreme Brahman of the nature of the peerless expanse of space, and who is ever perfectly full without any delusions. Nidaga, I have told you the characteristics of the Videhamukta in the manner expounded to me by the gracious Supreme Shiva. Whoever listens attentively and understands unmistakably this essence of the crest of the Vedas, subtle and rare, shall himself become the formless Supreme Brahman. Those who have not surrendered their minds to Shiva, who is all consciousness, and do not realize we are ourselves Shiva, can never attain the state of the Videhamukta, which is to be changeless as the Supreme Brahman, the reality itself. This is the truth, Nidaga. Thus, the sage Ribhu expounded the characteristics of the state of the Videhamukta. It is the perfectly full form of our Lord in a state of joyous dance that gives the exposition of the Videhamukta. As the eternal self, existing as not different from existence consciousness bliss, devoid of attachments to appearances such as the world, individuals, and the Supreme, and who is beyond the comprehension of words and mind. Oh, that's it. I guess the Videhamukta is the self. It's another word. It's another word for that which words can't touch. Thank you for listening. Blessings.